What's up, guys? This is Taking the Field with Stevie Mack, and on this episode, we're going to talk the Premier Lacrosse preseason, what to watch for in training camp, and just my general excitement level for this upcoming season. We'll also talk some of the preseason power rankings that I've got coming into this year, and just like last season, we'll update those each and every week during the regular season, and we'll finish it all off with the PLL head coach power rankings. This was something that I did, I believe, a few summers ago now, so we're going to bring that back heading in to year 4 in the Premier Lacrosse League. So just like I said, to start out, we'll do what to watch for here in training camp, and really one of the biggest storylines heading in to training camp here this Memorial Day weekend is the NLL players missing the start of the year due to the NLL playoffs and the chaos. Really the biggest team being impacted by that sort of scheduling crossover, it appears. They've made a number of roster moves from the player pool to replace some of those missing players. We'll kind of go down the list here in just a second of who some of those players are that they'll be without for the first week or so, it looks like, of the regular season, according to reports. But the Bandits are in the championship round for the NLL playoffs, and that's really where the Chaos are getting hurt the most with these NLL teams. Is they have Tehoka Nanticoke, Chris Cloutier, Ian McKay, Max Adler, Josh Byrne, Dane Smith, and Chase Frazier all on that Bandits roster going to the NLL championship game. So like I said, that's really where a bulk of their roster comes from, and where you would imagine a lot of their production is going to come from this season, and they're going to be without those guys, it looks like, from what I've read, for at least the first week or two of the regular season. And just some other notable players that I noted from that NLL playoff as it's currently going on that are not on PLL training camp rosters, which came out this morning, are Warren Jeffrey on the Archers, Zed Williams, obviously, for the Whipsnakes, Dylan Ward on the Water Dogs. Ryan Lee is currently injured, and he'll suit up for the Redwoods this summer. Those all coming from the Mammoths. And then the Seals, you have Mac O'Keefe on the Chaos, Wes Berg also on the Chaos. So again, the Chaos really being the team impacted the most, really, by these NLL playoffs. And then you've got Eli Gobrecht on the Water Dogs, just to name a bunch of them. I more than likely missed a few here and there, but those are really some of the bigger name guys that you will not see at least for probably week 1, I would imagine, although that Mammoths and Seals series is, as of today, 1-1, and I believe it's set a best of 3 series, so whichever way that series goes, you could see some of those guys suited up in week 1. And then obviously, as you guys know, I'm an Atlas fan through and through from day one, so one of the things that I've seen on the PLL Discord group, I've also seen a Lacrosse Playground talking about this topic earlier this week, as well, as far as the Atlas goes, and something to watch for in training camp, is that you bring 30 teams to training camp. If you didn't know that, now you do. And then you have the 25-man active roster once training camp concludes. So for the Atlas, you have at attack, you have Eric Law, Jeff Teat, Jake Caraway, Mark Cockerton, and Chris Gray, now all in that attack unit. So really the question around that unit has been, who is your top 3? Like, who do you put out there as your number 1 unit? And obviously from that, who comes out of the box, and is Cockerton really one of those guys on the outside of that group, sort of looking in, heading into training camp? So again, like I said, I've seen that topic thrown around quite a bit over the last few days. Like I said, Lacrosse Playground, I've also gone back and forth with them on Twitter. At Stevie Mac Media is my Twitter handle with them about this topic. And really my take from everything that I've seen and just my overall opinion on it is that I think you go with Law at X. I think he's been a staple of your offense the last several years, and I don't expect that to necessarily change with his leadership and what he brings to that offense this year. And then I think you go with Jeff Teat and Chris Gray on the wings, and you have Jake Carraway come from the box. So my reasoning behind that is that, like I said, Law, obviously one of those leaders of that offense, leader of that attack group, but also he's one of those sneaky attackmen that can finish on the doorstep. And when you watch him play, he really just floats at X and kind of waits for everything upfield around the midfield line. He waits for everything to kind of happen up there, and then as the defense moves around whatever's going on up there, he finds that window that he can sneak into, and as long as you can feed him that pass, he'll finish that more often than not on the doorstep. So really just a sneaky finisher around the crease and makes things happen around that crease off the ball. So like I said, I think that's a valuable thing that the Atlas can have in this offense. And then you look at a guy like Jeff Teat, will have a full season in the PLL this year, missed the first couple games of his rookie season, but he'll have a full year in the PLL this year and should be one of the top offensive players, not just attackman, but one of the top offensive players in the league, as last year he shot 40% overall and 78% in shots on goal, which nobody else in the top 10 for points shot that well a year ago. Doesn't matter if it was a midi, attackman, whatever. Nobody else shot it that well and also was in the top 10 in terms of total points. Now, Gray, I think, is an absolute weapon for this Atlas offense. Ben Rubior was lucky he fell into his lap at number 2. I talked about that last episode. So it'll be hard to keep a guy like that off the field once we break from training camp. And then, like I said before, Carraway will come out of the box and he'll have to be okay, I think, playing the Atlas's family style of lacrosse offensively and just do what's best for the team. If it's meant coming from the box to get some runs this summer and to get some touches and still be a productive member of this offense. And that is the biggest thing that we talked about last season with the Atlas, is that family style of lacrosse that they play offensively, where they're going to get everybody involved, everybody's going to get their touches, and even if you're not the one leading the way offensively in points or assists or whatever it may be, as long as your unit as a whole is putting up points and being productive and the end result is winning games, it's hard to argue with what you're doing as a team. It's always about the team with that offense. And I think if Carraway can be just another piece to that offense and another piece to that winning recipe, then all the better for Ben Rubior and his team. But I would say don't be surprised if it goes, at least at the start of the season, if it goes the other way around between Chris Gray and Jake Carraway. Don't be surprised if Gray is the one actually coming from the box and Carraway gets the nod on the opposite wing from Teat. Like I said, at least maybe for the first few games of the regular season until they kind of see where a guy like Chris Gray fits into this offense. And I think my last thing, talking about the Atlas here and sort of the storylines or the expectations going into this season, is that Jeff Teat is the betting favorite to win the MVP this year after finishing third in the PLL in points in 2021 behind Grant Amon and tied for second with Miles Jones. And I'd also say don't be surprised, don't sleep on Miles Jones to have another great year in the PLL this summer either, as he's currently plus 800 for the odds to win the MVP, which I believe offhand was the fourth best odds in the PLL for the MVP race. So again, don't be surprised if Miles Jones puts up another big season like the one he did last year. But my overall excitement level for this season in general, I think, is at an all-time high. I mean, this is the fourth year in the PLL, and it's really hard to believe that we're already entering year 4 of this league just because of how the last 3 years have gone and how exciting and energetic it's been, and just the growth around the league and the sport itself over these last couple of years. So hard to believe that it's already year 4. And also getting the games on ESPN's platforms and networks is going to be a huge thing as well this summer. And just there's so much talent across this league too, just from team to team. These teams are all so stacked. Every one of them has young, new talent coming in that's really easily to get excited about. So I think there's just so much to look forward to with this season in general and looking ahead to the next several years especially. And I think this could really be the first year where we look at these teams and we look at this league and say that the championship game, or even more so the semifinal matchups, it's really anyone's guess who's going to be in those last two games of the season here in 2022. So coming up in segment 2, just like I said, top of the show, we'll get into some PLL preseason power rankings, and we'll finish it off later on in segment 3, getting into some PLL coaching power rankings. But you're listening to Taking the Field with Stevie Mack. All right, welcome back. Segment 2 of Taking the Field with Stevie Mack. PLL preseason power rankings incoming. Just to jump right into it, the Whipsnakes, I've got number 1. I think they now have a chip on their shoulder after losing the championship in 2021. And Matt Rambo should be healthy this year, which is a major plus for them, because last year when he was down with his injury for, I believe it ended up being about a month, give or take about a week or so, but he did miss some extended time last year with some injuries. And you really saw that when he was out, you saw just how big of an impact he had on this team, as he was sort of their glue guy. He had that clutch factor like I talked about last season, and without him, they really missed that clutch factor, that clutch gene, if you will. And like I said, I think you started to see some of those deficiencies that this team really had that he in some ways masked with his play. Number 2, I've got the Water Dogs. The defense, I think, needs to begin the season how they ended last year, and they also need to hope that Dylan Ward doesn't make the NLL championship with the Mammoths, so that way he can come to them in week 1 and be an immediate impact this season. But like I said, I think the defense was one of 2 last year in the PLL to allow sub 11 goals against per game. The Archers were the only other team to do that. So I think really for them, a lot of what they can do this season comes from what version of their defense and what version of Dylan Ward are we going to get? Because I was critical of the defense and Dylan Ward the first half of last year, for as much as people talked about that unit and as much as people talked about Dylan Ward in specific and how good he was. We didn't necessarily see that translate on the field and just how good they could be until the second half of the year, when they just became flat out dominant on that half of the field. So if they can recreate the second half of the year last year for a full season this year, I definitely think we're talking about the Water Dogs as easily a top 3, if not top 4 team in the PLL. And don't forget, too, that the Water Dogs were the 2021 regular season champs, beating the Atlas in that final game of the regular season to get that number 1 seed and the bye in the first round of the playoffs. Number 3, I've got the Atlas, and they're a young team that I think are going to be built not only for now, but for the future as well. After adding the top offensive player in the 2021 draft in Jeff Teat, they then go out in 2022 and add the top offensive player in that draft class in Chris Gray, along with last year having the league's number 1 scoring offense. Now, the power play does need to be better in 2022, as they went just 3 of 13, which ranked 7th in the league a year ago. But you've got Trevor Baptiste back at the stripes. So the Atlas should win a good number of faceoffs, which they finished first as a team in faceoff percentage a year ago. And you really have to hope that the defense and Ken Clausen's group can take a big step forward here, especially getting Jack Kincannon back healthy and in the cage. Number 4, I've got the Redwoods. Now, the Redwoods had really, I guess, as people would call it nowadays, a mid-offense a year ago, but a top 4 scoring defense. You also have T.D. Erlin back taking faceoffs for your team after he got injured late last season, and he was second in the league only to Baptiste and the Atlas in terms of faceoff win percentage. And I think for the Redwoods, the man up and man down units were also a major strength of this team in 2021, ranking second and first in those categories respectively. Number 5, I've got the Archers, as Adam Gittleman, to me, had his best year of his PLL career a year ago, leading the league's top scoring defense. And the Archers also have, honestly, an embarrassment of riches on the offensive end of the field, ranking second in scoring and first in power play in 2021. But they also have to be better than their 44% mark at the stripe, which ranked 6th in the league a year ago, in order to get the ball to their offense a little more often. Because, like I said, with the second-ranked offense in the league, imagine if you're able to win a few more faceoffs, get the ball to your offense a few more times per game, how different maybe last season would have gone for them in their 5-win campaign. So the Archers do have the ability to turn defense into offense, as they also ranked 3rd in transition goals per game last season. Number 6, I've got the Chaos, and it seems weird to put the reigning champs this low on the list, but as we mentioned top of the show, they'll also be without a lot of guys who are still playing in the NLL playoffs, and those are guys that a lot of them are major contributors for that team. However, the team that finished 3rd in scoring defense and 1st in goalkeeping will start the year with that unit pretty much entirely intact. You've got Blaze Reardon, you've got Jared Newman, Jack Rowlett, Matt Reese, Troy Ray, and CJ Costabile all on that half of the field to start the year, all listed on their 30-man training camp roster this weekend. And that's not even mentioning that short stick D-mid unit, which now has Zach Geddes, Mark Lassini, TJ Camizio, and Patrick Resch, again, all listed on that 30-man training camp roster. So while there are some question marks about who exactly they're going to be running out there week 1 for the regular season because of some of those guys missing time in the NLL playoffs, one thing you can be sure of is they're going to have everything they need at the defensive end of the field. Number 7, I've got the Cannons, and I think while it's nice to have a guy like Lyle Thompson playing on your offense, he was 4th in the PLL in points last year and led the league, tied, I believe it was, for the league lead in goals. The defense still has to be able to stop someone, where they were last in scoring defense last season, and the Cannons also ranked last in faceoff percentage as a team, even though head coach Sean Quirk tried to overhaul that position mid-season and try to get something going at the stripe last year, but just unable to do so. Because the Cannons also ranked 4th in scoring offense in 2021, and kind of like we talked about a minute ago with the Archers, if you win a few more faceoffs here and there, or maybe in the case of the Cannons, if you get a few more stops on defense, get that ball to a guy like Lyle Thompson a few more times a game, imagine how differently maybe their season could have gone with how many 1-goal games they lost a year ago. And then number 8, I've got the Chrome. The Chrome finished last in 2021, but they did show some flashes at times, as their 2 wins came against the Whipsnakes, albeit without Matt Rambo, and the Archers were the other one. But they also dealt with a ton of injuries to key players, and while they're also getting a lot of those guys back this year, at least at the start of the season, guys like Randy Stotts, JT Giles Harris will be ready to go this year, and Jesse Bernhardt. They also had several notable retirements, including Joel White, John Galloway, and Jordan Wolf. So last season, the offense really relied heavily at times on their rookies like Jackson Morrill and Kevin Rogers, and now they add the number 1 pick in Logan Wisnauskas to that young offensive core. But I think the Chrome, similar to the Chaos and the Cannons ahead of them, just have a lot of questions that need to be answered in this early part of the season in order for them to be moved up here on these rankings. But that's how I have them, at least to start this season, 1 through 8 in the PLL. As I mentioned at the start of the segment, we will adjust as the season goes along. We'll see teams rise and fall week to week as we go along, but that is how they fall 1 through 8 here in the preseason. Final segment of the show coming up, we'll get the PLL coaches power rankings on the other side of this break. You're listening to Taking the Field with Stevie Mack. right, welcome back. Final segment here of Taking the Field with Stevie Mac. Segment 2, we went over the league power rankings, 1 through 8, ranking all 8 PLL teams. Now we're going to go through and rank the coaches, the head coaches, 1 through 8 here to start year number 4 in the PLL. Number 1, I've got Andy Towers. The Chaos finished 2019 as the regular season champs before eventually running into a red-hot Redwoods team in the playoffs. They eventually went on to the championship game in 2020 and were playing well against the Whipsnakes for about a half, and then the Whipsnakes went and made some halftime adjustments and pulled away in the end. And then 2021, they would return to the championship game and win it this time over the Whipsnakes. So not a bad first 3 years for Andy Towers and the Chaos in the PLL. And I think for them, really here in year 4, the name of the game is to avoid another slow start like they did in 2020 in the PLL bubble and in 2021 as well. Number 2, I've got Jim Stagnita. He's won back-to-back championships to begin the PLL. And we really wondered at that point, after that second one in the PLL bubble, we really wondered if anyone was ever going to catch the Whipsnakes. And we have not had a championship game to this point, at least, without the Whipsnakes being present in the game. And when the Whipsnakes faced injuries from guys like Zed Williams and especially with Matt Rambo a year ago, we saw kind of just how human this team really is and can be. But when they are healthy, when they do have a healthy Zed Williams, when they do have a healthy Matt Rambo, they easily have to be one of the top 2 teams in the PLL. So that's going to be the goal for them this season, is to make sure that those 2 especially remain healthy from start to finish. Number 3, I've got Nat St. Laurent. With the Chaos winning the championship in 2021, I really think that the Redwoods are now sort of that team that are the closest to winning a championship but haven't yet done so. And Nat St. Laurent is the kind of guy that you want leading your team and running the show, and he really seems like he knows how to assemble a roster and put pieces in a position to be successful and put guys around each other that know how to play together. But the Woods also seem like they're just one game or one play at times away from reaching a championship. And you can go back to the 2019 championship overtime loss to the Whipsnakes when Rambo scored the game winner there. You can go to the 2020 semifinals again against the Whipsnakes in the PLL bubble. Again, just one play, as that game was in overtime, one play away from making that championship game. So they really just seem like they're one game or even at times one play away from sort of getting over that hump and being a championship team. Number 4, I've got Ben Rubior. And while he hasn't really been around very long, just entering his 3rd year as the head coach of the Atlas, his impact and vision for what this Atlas team is and can be, I think, is already extremely transparent by the way that they played last year. They had one of the hottest offenses in the league. They finished tied with the best record in the league at 6-3. And this year, I think the hope is that the Atlas can take that next step and compete for a championship and really be one of those top 3, at worst top 4 teams in the league, and potentially see them playing in that championship game, whether it be against the Redwoods, the Chaos, the Whipsnakes, whoever it may be. And I think that for as much as I talk about Rubior's roster moves on paper, we talk about the draft and some of the trades that he's made to acquire draft picks and things like that. I think it has to continue to translate to the field this season, but I definitely think going into 2022, after the way that they played in 21, the Atlas's stock is definitely going to continue rising. Number 5, I've got Andy Copeland. While the Water Dogs struggled in the PLL bubble in their first year, and they struggled out of the gate in 2021, they also finished as the regular season champs last season, and they did go on to lose in the semifinals to the Whipsnakes. But I think that if Andy Copeland and the Water Dogs have another strong season and they finish top 3, top 4 in the PLL this summer, you could make the argument for him being in that top 4 of PLL coaches by season's end. Number 6, I've got Chris Bates, because to me, he really seems like one of those coaches where you have a roster that many people would kill to possess, as the Archers last year had 5 of the top 20 point producers in the PLL, plus Adam Gittleman was having his best season in the league a summer ago, yet the Archers lost in the first round of the Chaos and won just 5 games a year ago. On top of that, I also think the Archers sort of rode the coattails of their 2 blowout wins early in the season to the Atlas and the Water Dogs, as they would later finish the season with a league best plus 24 goal differential, even with the 5-4 overall record. They did have the number 2 scoring offense behind the Atlas. They had the number 1 scoring defense, and they had the number 1 power play in the league, along with the number 1 penalty killing unit. While also, as I mentioned, having a solid season from Adam Gittleman, where their goalies had the second highest save percentage in the league behind the Chaos and obviously Blaze Reardon. So I think that for Bates and the Archers, they just need to find a way to put this star-studded team to the level that I think we all think they're at. Number 7, I've got Sean Quirk. I know that Quirk in his past in the MLL was a championship level coach, and I'm really more focused on the what have you done for me lately, especially with this Cannons group in the PLL. And I think that behind a league worst scoring defense and the league's worst faceoff unit, which to me wasted what was by far Paul Rabel's best year in the PLL, which they also surrendered first round picks in order to get him on top of that. And you also wasted Lyle Thompson leading the league in goals and was one of the top 4 point producers in the league a year ago. I think that Quirk has made some aggressive trades since taking the lead of this Cannons team a year ago, and now he just needs to hope that those moves begin to pay off on the field. Otherwise, looking ahead to 2023 is another year of no first-round draft picks and nothing, essentially, if last year is another repeat this year, he would have nothing to show for trading away another first-round pick. Number 8, I've got Tim Sudan. The Chrome were a team that I think, similar to the Atlas in the very beginning of the PLL, that they played hard, but hardly ever came away with wins for the effort before Sudan got to them. And then after flirting with 500 in the bubble his first season, many believe that the Chrome were sort of on the rise at that point and were poised to take a big step forward in 2021, but that step forward never happened. And I do get that they had their share of injuries a year ago, but really any team anywhere in any sport deals with their share of injuries. I mean, it's just part of playing the game and playing sports in general, is injuries do happen, and you just have to be able to move on and still find a way to be able to compete and win more than 2 games. And even looking at this past off season, you get those guys back from injury, guys that I mentioned before, like Jesse Bernhardt, JT Giles Harris, etc., etc. You get those guys back from injury, but this off season, you also had some notable players retire. So if the Chrome don't come out and win more than 2 games this year, are we just going to blame it on the fact that guys like Joel White and John Galloway and Jordan Wolf retired? Because at some point, like I said, at some point, it does matter winning and losing games. It's not just about being competitive. You can be competitive without winning a single game, right? It doesn't matter about the injuries or who retires. I mean, you can look at the Atlas a year ago. Jack Kincannon goes down with an injury. They're a team that's on the rise. They're battling for one of those top spots in the PLL standings. All of a sudden, Kincannon gets injured. And I know for me as an Atlas fan, I'm thinking, well, shoot, this is about the worst time that could have happened. But JD Colarusso comes in, and in a lot of ways, when you look at the statistics and you look at the analytics, in a lot of ways, Colarusso was as good, if not better, than Jack Kincannon in some cases, and helped carry this team and helped bring this team to a borderline championship level. So eventually, the injuries will happen, but you still have to find a way to battle through those. And that's something that I think Sudan and this Chrome team will have to do this season, is just find a way to win more than 2-3 games in a season. So that'll do it for this episode of Taking the Field with Stevie Mack. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this episode. You can also check out the podcast by searching Taking the Field with Stevie Mack on Apple, Google, Spotify, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, just to name a few. We're just about anywhere you guys get your podcasts. But that'll do it for me. I'll talk to you guys later.